Amendment is under attack today. Church and state uniting in America? Impossible, you say. Don't be so quick to scoff. Why would America change from a republic to a democracy and finally to a theocracy? Could things get so bad in America to cause the pendulum to swing to the far right? The greatest threat to a republic or a democracy is a theocracy. Let's first look at the freedom documents from early America. The Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. These documents protect the natural rights of all American citizens. In order to guarantee religious liberty, our founding fathers mandated the strict separation of church and state. This kept the government from funding, regulating, or endorsing religion. The First Amendment reads, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances." The First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution guarantees religious freedom in America. The fundamental right to worship as one chooses or not to worship. This is freedom. I am for freedom of religion and against all maneuvers to bring about a legal ascendancy of one sect over another. Thomas Jefferson. The First Amendment of our Constitution allows the people to worship God according to the dictates of their own conscience, or not at all. The Constitution prevents the powerful forces of church and state from uniting into a religious dictatorship. This system of checks and balances keeps the government from funding and controlling the churches, and prevents religious organizations from creating religious legislation that would violate the natural rights of American citizens. Our country is not yet a theocracy, but it is moving in that direction. Religion is driving American politics these days, and corrupt religious leaders are using God as the battering ram to break down this wall of separation of church and state, brick by brick. Separation of powers is a political doctrine under which the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of government are kept distinct to prevent abuse of power. The U.S. form of separation of powers is widely known as checks and balances. The constitutional framers ensured that the principal powers of the government, legislative, executive, and judicial, were not concentrated in the hands of any single branch. Why? They knew that absolute power corrupts absolutely. Our system of separated powers is not designed to maximize efficiency. It is designed to maximize freedom to all people. Separation of church and state is a form of separation of powers. Church and state powers are kept distinctly separate to prevent the abuse of power. Men and women of good morals and conviction should run for government offices, but they must not be allowed to violate our Constitution by passing religious legislation. The government should not fund churches with faith-based grants or vouchers. Our government should pass civil laws, not religious laws. We must understand the difference between religious laws and civil laws. The principle of separation of church and state keeps the two most powerful forces in our society separate. When church and state unite, no one is safe. Who would decide what is considered moral? The founders of our nation believed that America should have the right to worship according to their own beliefs, or not worship at all. They were so committed to freedom that they enshrined it in the first sentence of the Bill of Rights. The Founding Fathers' language was so strong because they knew their history and personally experienced religious tyranny. They wanted to make sure that religious persecution would not take place in America. The purpose of separation of church and state is to keep forever from these shores the ceaseless strife that has soaked the soil of Europe with blood for centuries. James Madison. Sinclair Lewis once said, "When fascism comes to this country, it will be wrapped in the flag, carrying a cross." What did Jesus think about the relationship between church and state? Remember, he was put to death by the state obeying the wishes of the church. In Mark 12:17, "And Jesus answering said unto them, Render to Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." Jesus was put to death by the state, caving into the demands of the church. Jesus did not violate any civil laws. In fact, Pilate did not want to condemn Jesus. He found no fault in him. The church leaders were jealous of him because the people loved his teachings and his doctrines were contrary to the doctrines of the Jewish church. The Roman governor Pilate gave in to the demands of the church leaders and ordered that Jesus be crucified. Another example of the state giving in to the demands of the church. Even Jesus wasn't safe from the wrath of the church. The framers of the U.S. Constitution were concerned that European history might repeat itself in the New World. They wanted to avoid the continual wars motivated by religious hatred that had decimated many countries within Europe. They decided that a church-state separation was their best assurance that the new republic would remain relatively free of inter-religious strife. Compared to the rest of the world, the USA has the greatest amounts of religious peace in the world. America is a country of refuge to all people that are fleeing political or religious persecution throughout the world. But as we know, good things don't last forever. History always seems to repeat itself, and we are definitely headed for a theocracy in America. It is not only the Republican Party that has been taken captive by the clergy. The Democratic Party has its own way of micromanaging the personal lives of the people. Why does this always happen? A democracy that does not follow the Constitution will always vote itself into tyranny, no matter if it is dominated by the Republicans or Democrats. A republic form of government rules by law and protects the people against tyranny. Our country needs a new party that will follow the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. Today, religious leaders are using their churches to promote presidential candidates. They tell their congregation that God has been kicked out of the government and they need more money to fight the liberals and atheists that want to keep church and state separate. We should be appalled by the way the churches are manipulating their sincere church members. The churches have become a religious matrix, one command from a powerful TV evangelist, and the flock of sheep obey. This is a quote from Pat Robertson. "There is no such thing as separation of church and state in the Constitution. It is a lie of the left, and we are not going to take it anymore." Pat Robertson is dangerously wrong. People that believe in separation of church and state want to protect religious liberty from the corrupting influence of politics and government regulation. Many churches are becoming very rich and powerful corporations with a tax-exempt status from the IRS and the recipients of faith-based religious funding. George Bush's faith-based initiatives is a violation of the Bill of Rights, which prohibits our tax dollars from funding religious organizations. The government is now in the business of funding religion with your tax dollars, and this violates the Bill of Rights. During George Bush's administration, he has made void most of our Constitution and Bill of Rights, and our Democratic and Republican representatives have allowed him to destroy our country. Benjamin Franklin, statesman, inventor, author, in a letter to Dr. Price: "When religion is good, it will take care of itself. When it is not able to take care of itself, and God does not see fit to take care of it, so that it has to appeal to the civil power for support, it is evidence to my mind that its cause is a bad one." The law of love is the foundation of the government of God. The Bible reads, "If you love me, keep my commandments." John 14:15. God desires from all his creatures the service of love, service that springs from an appreciation of his character. He takes no pleasure in a forced obedience, and to all he grants freedom of will, that they may render him voluntary service. It is a corrupt church that seeks the aid of the civil power for the enforcement of her doctrines. Religious tyranny can only develop in certain government structures like a democracy or a theocracy. Our nation was founded as a republic. In our republic, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the Bill of Rights guarantee the natural rights of the people. These natural rights are from God, not man. In a democracy, there is a possibility for religious tyranny if the majority favor it and votes it in. There are no natural rights, but civil rights are granted by the majority and taken away just as easy. One big crisis and the churches will be clamoring for religious legislation. They have done it in the past, and history has a tendency to repeat itself. This is where we are today, but moving towards a theocracy. In a theocracy, there is religious tyranny, and the rights of the minorities are disregarded. People are often killed for violating moral or religious laws. The Constitution protects the church from government interference and protects the people from religious persecution. This is religious liberty. The Constitution only allows the government to pass civil laws, not religious laws. Only theocracies pass religious laws, and theocracies don't respect the rights of the people that are not of the majority religion. A theocracy is a country in which control is in the hands of the clergy. It may also be the case that the head of the theocratic government is the head of a specific religion, as in the case of the Vatican City. The Roman Catholic Church has had a long history of inflicting religious persecution. The Inquisition is just one example of European religious tyranny when the Roman Catholic Church and the state ruled together. They used a form of persecution called the Inquisition, which sent thousands to secret courts, torture, punishment, and death because they disagreed with the Church's teachings. Many religious leaders want to see church and state united once again. They are breaking down the wall of separation brick by brick. When the church and state get together, no one is safe. Jesus never advocated political reforms and always focused on the moral reform of the heart as the solution to society's problems. Today, the churches are trying to make the Ten Commandments a part of our American Western law. In fact, there are already many laws that have been introduced and some passed. Religious leaders think that forced morality will change the heart of the nation and bring its people back to God. Do I hear a theocracy coming to America? We hear strange comments coming from the courts and pulpits today. The country is worried about wars, economic collapse, corruption in the government, disasters, food shortages, crime, global warming, loss of liberty and freedom. The conditions are in place for a judicial shift in the direction of a theocracy. The First Amendment is being attacked. We must defend the separation of church and state at all costs. Separation of church and state is a necessary component of true religious freedom. A past Supreme Court Justice named William Rehnquist says, "The greatest injury of the wall notion is its mischievous diversion of judges from the actual intentions of the drafters of the Bill of Rights." The wall of separation between church and state is a metaphor based on bad history, a metaphor which has proved useless as a guide to judging. It should be frankly and explicitly abandoned. In sermons based on the Ten Commandments, the late Pope John Paul denounced excessive materialism, divorce, contraception, and the separation of church and state. Reverend James Kennedy at his Reclaiming America for Christ conference. Powerful forces, he says, are at work here. Kennedy talks fervently about going beyond the destruction of the Berlin Wall to battering down the even more diabolical wall of separation that has led to increasing secularization, godlessness, immorality, and corruption in our country. Kennedy also says, our job is to reclaim America for Christ, whatever the cost. Kennedy says, as the vice-regents of God, we are to exercise godly dominion and influence over our neighborhoods, our schools, our government, our literature and arts, our sports arenas, our entertainment media, our news media, our scientific endeavors, in short, over every aspect and institution of human society. Does this sound like religious freedom or theocratical tyranny? The First Amendment is constantly being attacked by religious leaders. Religious liberty is only safe under a republic form of government. The republic is the only form of government which is not eternally at open or secret war with the rights of mankind. Thomas Jefferson. What is a republic form of government? We are not talking about the Republican Party of today. A republic is a form of government structure that America's founding fathers set up for us initially. Unfortunately, over the years, our republic has been butchered and altered, and now we are under a totalitarian democracy and moving into the most dangerous form of government called theocracy. Theocracies torture and kill people in the name of religion. We have history as our teacher. In a republic, you have natural, God-given rights. The natural rights of minorities are protected by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights from the majority or mob rule. Our republic was founded on a solid foundation called the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. These documents have inspired people from all over the world. This is the main reason people want to live in America, the land of the free. What is a republic? A republic is a structure of government that exists to protect the rights and property of the sovereign people. Does that sound like our government today? Our government today represents corporate America and mainstream media. In a democracy, the majority rules. It is a dangerous form of mob rule. Instead of the natural rights, you have civil rights bestowed upon you as a privilege granted by the majority. If the majority decides to vote 51 to 49% in favor of taking away your God-given rights, so be it. A democracy can easily become a dictatorship. A democracy is based on the feelings of the majority of people that are often controlled by mainstream media, power-hungry politicians, and corrupt religious leaders. A democracy is the rule by majority, or mobocracy. Democracy means the majority rules. Our founding fathers believed in the rule of law, which is our Constitution, not the rule of men. They understood that because of the fallen state of man, he would inevitably vote himself into slavery and tyranny if provided the tools. In a democracy, the majority, Republicans or Democrats, can pretty much do whatever they want. The ultimate authority is the will of the people, no matter how misguided and short-sighted it might be. In a republic, the rule is by law. Our Constitution and the Bill of Rights protect the liberties of all people. The founders of our Constitution set up a country that all people can worship according to the dictates of their own conscience, or not at all. In order to understand why we should have a separation of church and state, let's look at what a theocracy is. A theocracy is religious mobocracy, or a union of church and state. Another definition of theocracy is a government under the control of church or state-sponsored religion. History reveals that millions of people were put to death in the name of religion throughout history. If we forget history, we are destined to allow our country to turn into a theocracy. Our founding fathers knew their history, and the Constitution was drafted so religious persecution would never happen in America as long as it remained a republic and followed the Constitution. The United States is home to many different religions, traditions, denominations, and sects. If laws are passed that regulate worship, whose definition of worship would become the law of the land? You can see the wisdom of our founding fathers in promoting the separation of church and state. Theocracy means that the majority religion or the religion of the state rules the people and legislates morality. In our country, a Muslim, Jew, Catholic, Baha'i, Buddhist, Hindu, Protestant, or atheist can live in total freedom without the fear of persecution. That is the freedom that is guaranteed by our Constitution and Bill of Rights, and the reason that America leads out in spreading the gospel to the world. Why is it that so many Americans think that a democracy is the best form of government? Our country was founded as a republic, not a democracy or theocracy. And why isn't this taught in schools today? Every man ought to be protected in worshiping the deity according to the dictates of his own conscience. George Washington, letter to the United Baptist Churches in Virginia in May 1789. Among the Christian exiles who fled to America and sought an asylum from royal oppression and priestly intolerance were many who determined to establish a government upon the broad foundation of civil and religious liberty. Their views found place in the Declaration of Independence, which sets forth the great truth that all men are created equal and endowed with the inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the Constitution guarantees to the people the right of self-government, providing that representatives elected by the popular vote shall enact and administer the laws. Freedom of religious faith was also granted, every man being permitted to worship God according to the dictates of his conscience. Republicanism and Protestantism became the fundamental principle of the nation. These principles are the secret of its power and prosperity. The oppressed and downtrodden throughout Christendom have turned to this land with interest and hope. Millions have sought its shores, and the United States has risen to a place among the most powerful nations of the earth. Our government should be neutral on religious matters, leaving such decisions between the individual and their God. Americans enjoy more religious freedom than any people in the history of the world. We should be proud of this accomplishment and work to preserve the constitutional principle that made it all possible, the separation of church and state. That is why America loves God and gives more money to charities than any country in the world. Because of this religious freedom, America has spread the message of the gospel throughout the world through its many wonderful ministries. By maintaining the wall separating church and state, we can guarantee the continued vitality of religion in American life. Wake up, America, before you lose your freedom.